For all self-coders, I have here a blank notebook and the project brief for the third project. And project 3 is all about cleaning a messy real-world dataset. Now, the first assignment is pretty simple. You have to load and inspect the data, and you should be able to identify a couple of columns with nested and stringified data. So that's the dataset, and in case you want to discover and clean the dataset completely on your own, then you should stop the video now, as I will highlight the major issues and the major steps in the next couple of minutes. Coming now to assignment number 2, and here you should drop some irrelevant columns like adult, original title, or homepage. And probably one of the major issues in this dataset is that we have nested and stringified data in some columns. So the original dataset is quite complex and nested, and it actually doesn't really fit into a tabular two-dimensional data format like a pandas data frame. And therefore here in assignment 3, you have to evaluate the actual Python expressions in the following stringified columns. So for example, belongs to collection, genre, production countries, and production companies. And as an example, the elements in the genre column are actually lists containing dictionaries, but these lists are actually stored as strings with quotes, so to say stringified. And in a very first step here, we have to remove the quotes and evaluate the actual Python expression. So for example, a list or a dictionary. And I guess most of you haven't done that before. And it's definitely not a shame to get some hints or watch the solution here. So once we have evaluated the actual Python expressions, then in the next step, we have to flatten the nested columns and extract only some pieces of information from the nested data. So for example, here in the column belongs to collection, you should only extract the collection name and overwrite the column belongs to collection. So for example, the value in the first row, it's the Toy Story row. So the movie Toy Story should be Toy Story collection. Then next, you should extract all genre names from the column genre and overwrite genre. So if a movie has more than one genre, then the genres should be separated by a pipe symbol. And again, we have an example here. So in the first row, the Toy Story row, the final result should be the string animation pipe, comedy pipe, family. Then next in assignment 6, you have to extract all spoken language names from the column spoken languages and overwrite the column. And also here, if a movie has more than one spoken language, then you should separate the languages by a pipe. And for example, Toy Story has only one spoken language, it is English. And the same you should also do for the columns production countries, so extracting the countries, and also for production companies. And once you have created the new columns, production companies, spoken languages, genres, and so on, then you should inspect and further analyze those columns, for example, with value counts. And it might be the case that you can't see anything strange, and you should actually take reasonable measures or actions. Now, coming to numerical columns, and first of all, you have to convert the data type in the columns budget, ID, popularity to numeric. And then you should further analyze the columns budget, revenue, and runtime. And we have many zeros, so the value 0. And the question is if the value 0 is the most appropriate value. And if not, you should take appropriate action. Then next you should convert budget and revenue into a million US dollar. So convert and override. And finally, we have the columns vote count and vote average. And you should closer analyze those movies with a vote count of 0 and have a look at the vote average for those movies. And also here the question is whether the value is the most appropriate value here. And if not, you should take some reasonable measures. Then we go on with the datetime columns, and here you should convert the data type in the column release date to datetime. Then next in assignment 15, you have to analyze the text columns overview and tagline, and you should try to identify missing data that is not represented by NaN. So for example, by a string like no data or no data available. And you should definitely replace those values with a missing value, NaN. Then next you have to identify and remove duplicates and drop all rows or movies with unknown ID or title. And finally, you should only keep those rows or movies in the data frame where we have 10 or more non-missing values. Coming now to the final steps, and assignment 19 requires you to keep only those rows or movies with the status released, and then you should drop the column status, and you should change the order of the columns, and actually you should adopt the following order and reset the index to create a range index. And finally, you should save the cleaned data set in a new CSV file. And also here I've provided some hints in case you have some problems. So have fun and see you also in the solutions videos. Bye. Alright, we are starting with the CSV file movies metadata.csv that we received from a colleague. And of course, the first step is to just import the data into pandas and to inspect the data. And therefore we import pandas. And we also increase the number of displayed columns to 30. Then we use the read CSV method and we create a data frame that we save in the variable df. And here we get a dtime warning. So this is a great start here actually. So columns in total 10 have mixed data types. And either we can specify the data type option on import or set the low memory to false. So let's do the second one here. And we will handle the data types later on. And this is here our data frame. And in total we have over 45,000 rows or movies and 24 columns. And at a first glance, so here we can see our nested JSON data in belongs to collection, genres, and so on. And let's also have a look at some meta information with the info method. And here we can see that in 4 columns we have float data type, and in 20 columns text or mixed data types. And obviously we have, for instance, in the budget column mixed data types. So this should be a numerical column, but we have object indicating mixed data types. And also we could have mixed data types in popularity. So this should also be a numerical column, or release date. This should be a datetime column. And in addition, we can see that in some columns we have quite a few missing values. So for instance, in the homepage column, we only have 7,700 non-missing values. And finally, let's inspect some nested columns. For instance, the genre column. And at a first glance, this doesn't look too bad, but if we have a look at one element, so the first one, then we can see here that we have so-called stringified JSON data. So this is nested and actually a string and not a list. And the same we can also see in the belongs to collection column. So here we have partly dictionaries. But in fact, these elements here are strings. So to sum up, we have a really messy data set here, and we will have a lot to do to clean the data set up in the next lectures. So hope to see you there. Bye. Before we are starting with the actual data cleaning process, we should check whether we can get rid of some attributes and some columns that we don't need later on. And this enables us to continue with a leaner data frame. Of course, it depends on the ultimate goal of our analysis, whether a column is important or not. And sometimes we should decide this later on in the process. But in our case, we can drop some columns now. that we likely don't need for the explanatory data analysis and data presentation. And again, let's have a look at the columns. And first of all, we can see the adult column. And we can have a closer look with the value counts. And obviously, the most frequent value is false. So then we have true with only 9 instances. And obviously then we have data that doesn't fit here into this column. So it seems like a tagline or something. So the adults column indicate whether a movie contains adult content. However, the vast majority of movies are non-adult anyway. And therefore we should delete the adult column. And we can actually do this with a drop, and we pass adult to columns. And we shouldn't forget to set in place to true. Next, we can also delete an alternative movie ID provided by the IMDb database. So we still have a movie ID. It's the movie database ID. Then we can also delete the original titles. So it's sufficient to have the English titles. Next, video indicates whether there is a trailer video available, and also this we can delete actually. And finally, the homepage column includes links to the movie's homepage, and also this we can drop now. So these were the columns that we will definitely not need, and maybe we can identify some more columns in the next lectures. So hope to see you there. Bye.